In the kingdom of Garosfon, there lived a girl who possessed powerful magic. It was she who played a major role in the 20-year war with the kingdom of Valtar. Thus, the girl became the heroine of the kingdom of Garosfon and became famous. But 3 months after the war ended in November, everything changed dramatically, and the proclaimed heroine was about to be executed in the enemy kingdom. People expressed their hatred towards the girl and said that their children died because of her. If it were not for this demon, the husbands and sons of this people would be alive. Stones were thrown at the girl, which hit her right in the head and caused her unbearable pain. Now people are ready to burn with hellfire the man who took their loved ones away from them. They intend to send her straight to the devil, as they consider the girl to be a real demon. After this, an announcement is made that the heroine Garosfon and the greatest sinner, Valtar, will be executed. All the people begin to rejoice and thirst for revenge for what Celia Felix has done to this kingdom. After all, because of her hellish magic, more than 1,000 people died in this war. All the people unanimously begin to shout and demand the highest measure of punishment for the heroine. While they yearn for her death, an exhausted Celia continues to hang silently from the pole. She considers herself a knight who bravely defended her country from strangers. There were also people in her kingdom for whom she fought selflessly. This was Monsieur Claude, who caught the girl's attention with his light curls and clear eyes. Celia couldn't take her eyes off this charming man, but while they were being affectionate with each other, another figure in this triangle faded into the background. One red-haired girl bit her finger in envy when she saw Claude with another. Eventually, the moment came when the man accused his companion of betrayal. There was a document on his desk that clearly showed that Celia was collaborating with the kingdom of Valtar. Claude was incredibly angry that the girl had been hiding this fact from him all this time. But Celia never worked for Valtar and doesn't understand why she is being accused of doing so. She was always a faithful knight and would never betray her master. However, for Claude, all her excuses do not matter, and tomorrow he is going to hand over Celia to the kingdom of Valtar. It is impossible to convey all the horror that the girl experienced at that moment. Celia tearfully asks Claude not to make a mistake and to believe that she is not guilty of anything. But at that moment, her younger sister intervenes in the conversation and says that all the evidence is there. Therefore, Celia should voluntarily confess that she is Valtar's accomplice. However, the girl demands that Juliet not even dare to say such terrible things, and the sister only repeats again that Celia is a traitor and must behave quietly. At this moment, another knight appears in the office and decides to stand up for the girl. He reports that Felix's influence is stronger than anyone else's in this kingdom. Therefore, Claude should think carefully before making such a harsh decision. And Celia didn't expect that Kai would stand up for her in such a difficult situation. However, His Highness continues to stand his ground and considers the girl's actions to be an obvious sin. He has already made an unshakable decision for himself and asks the knight to stop discussing this. At this moment, Juliet jumps up from her seat and runs up to her sister. The girl stands in front of Celia and begins to look her straight in the eyes. After this, Juliet reports that she now feels very well. Celia is outraged that at such a terrible moment, her sister is gloating to her face. At this moment, the guards burst into the office and announce that the girl is being arrested. They grab her by the hands and do not leave her with a single chance for fair justice. Claude no longer listens to his companion and demands that the knights take her out of his sight. So Celia found herself in the enemy kingdom, tied to a stake for execution. Now they laugh in the face of the great goddess of war and are going to burn her alive. At this moment, one of the men decides to turn his attention to her hands. He notices a ring on Celia's finger that seems quite expensive to him. The man begins to take off a valuable thing, which is a memory of her mother for the girl. After the terrible betrayal and the news of death, this is the one thing she doesn't want to say goodbye to. Celia asks the man to stop, but he says that the girl will no longer need the ring. Then he looks at the thing carefully and realizes that he was wrong. The ring turned out to be a cheap piece of junk and had no value. The man boldly throws it to the ground, as this trinket is of no use. Thus, Celia's ring ends up on the ground, right under her pillar. After this, the man gives the order to set the fire, and the girl is engulfed in flames. All the people rejoice because they can witness the death of the demon who killed their loved ones. Celia becomes very hot and finds it difficult to breathe in this flame. Is it really possible that after all her exploits, she will die in such disgrace in an enemy kingdom? Suddenly, she hears a familiar voice calling out her name loudly. Celia looks up with tear-stained eyes and sees the only chance for salvation. Kai appears next to the angry crowd, who will not let the heroine die so easily. He makes every effort to save poor Celia with the help of magic. This is the only person who remained by the girl's side after being accused of betrayal. If she had listened to his words earlier, then perhaps all this would not have happened. In pain and despair, Celia closes her eyes tightly and begins to lose consciousness. The last thing that flashes before her eyes is the bright sparks from the fire. Suddenly, the girl wakes up absolutely alive and well in a soft bed. There are still tears in her eyes, and she doesn't understand what happened. Celia decides to look around and sees that she is in her room and in her bed. But how is this possible if just a second ago they were going to burn her at the stake? Maybe it was all just a bad dream, and everything is actually fine. However, the girl clearly remembers all those sensations, and she was definitely burned. She was betrayed by her country and by Monsieur Claude, who sent her to an enemy country. Celia will never forget the hatred with which the man looked at her. She lived for the kingdom of Garosfan and its people, but they all betrayed her. After this, the girl decides to get out of bed and goes to her mirror. But what she sees in the reflection greatly shocks our heroine. Celia doesn't understand why she suddenly looks much younger than her age. She puts her hands to her face and feels the very soft skin underneath them. Her fingers used to be scarred, and she wore a ring on one of them in memory of her mother. Suddenly, a maid enters the room and sees that the mistress has already woken up. It would be better if she caught her sleeping to reduce her workload. And now Celine is only interested in what year and month it really is. But the maid doesn't understand how the girl could forget about her birthday. After all, today is June 11th, 1290, and Celine is turning 17. And the girl realizes that somehow she returned to the past 7 years ago. On the continent of Macaria, there are two kingdoms, Garosfan and Valtar. 20 years ago, a war began between these kingdoms for the inheritance of Garosfan. It was a very protracted and complex war, which resulted in the destruction of many lands. But the most terrible thing was that many people died in this battle. And when both countries were in despair, a light descended upon the kingdom of Garosfan in the form of Celia Felix. This girl was an illegitimate child from a count's family and had a talent for magic. With the help of fiery thunder, she led her homeland to victory in a protracted war. Thus, Celia received the nickname of the Goddess of War and became a real heroine. She is still hurt by the betrayal she experienced. But why did she suddenly go back 7 years? Everything that happened haunts the girl, and she tries to find at least some explanation for what is happening. She recalls the events that happened to her before her mysterious reincarnation. At that time, Celia was with Claude in the military camp and listened to his speech about the upcoming victory. The man was sincerely grateful to the girl for the fact that, thanks to her, they were able to go so far in this battle. But Celia was very modest and did not want to take all the credit. Moreover, all her efforts are aimed at being useful to the country. At this point, Claude falls silent, and an awkward pause appears in the tent. Then, the man suddenly hugs the girl, which comes as a surprise. Claude reports that the success of this operation depends solely on Celia's work, so he hopes that she will fulfill his request with the help of her magic. Celia is very embarrassed by what is happening and by His Highness's strong embrace, but she decides to hug him back and says that she will be happy to fulfill his request. Claude hugs Celia even tighter and thanks her for making the right choice. However, the girl does not see that the man's smile at this moment looks completely insincere. That same evening, Celia decides to take a walk in the forest near the military camp. But to her great surprise, the girl turns out not to be alone there. She notices Kai, who is also a knight of the kingdom, by the tree. Celia addresses him by name, but the man asks to be called Earl Cole. His reaction stems from his displeasure with the girl's decision to agree to Claude's reckless strategy. However, Celia, as a true knight, must follow the orders of her superiors. But Kai believes that only a true fool would follow such orders. He then adds that Celia is like the girls who hang around His Highness. She is so blinded by her love for Claude that she does not see anything around her. Celia is outraged by such rude words and demands that such nonsense not be spoken. and Kai tries to convey to the girl the fact that Claude is simply using her for his own purposes. He considers her an ordinary pawn that can be controlled as he pleases. But Celia is sure that all this is a blatant lie, and Monsieur Claude actually loves her. And Kai says that if a person truly loves someone, he will not act like this. And he certainly won't send a loved one to certain death. However, Celia doesn't even intend to listen to him and asks him to leave her alone. After this, she leaves and demands that Kai mind his own business and keep his advice to himself. And Celia, as a knight, intends to use her magic to complete the mission. She is happy with this strategy, and it is not about her feelings, but about obligations. But Kai is angry that Celia didn't even listen to his words. And on such an unpleasant note, our heroes part ways, without reaching an understanding. After everything that happened, Celia remembers the words of Kai, who only wanted to protect her. She feels like a complete fool for not even trying to listen to him. In the end, Kai turned out to be right, and Celia felt it fully. Because of her love for Monsieur Claude, she had overlooked something truly important. She doesn't know why she went back to the past, but now it's her chance to start her life with a clean slate and not make the same mistakes. Now, Celine is determined to become the mistress of her own life. Finally, the moment has come that will allow her to become happy in this world. If she is now 17 years old, then there is only 1 year left until she becomes Lord Claude's knight. This is enough to start all over again, but she will not be able to change anything if she continues to live in this house. So Celia decides to find someone who can become her guardian. At this moment, she begins to stare at the maid, who is greatly embarrassed by such a look. She is unhappy and asks him to stop looking at her with such eyes. Celia apologizes and decides to finally find out the name of her maid. The girl calls herself Marie and listens to a speech about her mistress being an illegitimate child. This may be why the maid thinks badly of Celia, but now she should be shown respect. The lady asks to bring her something to eat, and Marie almost lets go of the basin of water from shock. After all, if Celia understands that she is just a dirty child, then why does she suddenly decide to give orders? After this, the girl decides to explain important things to the impudent maid. Although she is an illegitimate child, she is also the daughter of Count Talaz. Therefore, the maid cannot ignore her requests and treat her with disdain. In addition to this, Celia asks to call the butler Floquet, while Marie goes for food. The maid leaves, and the girl is satisfied with how she is starting her new life. A short time later, the butler appears in her room, and Celia apologizes for calling him so suddenly. The girl hands Floca a letter and asks him to deliver it as soon as possible. In addition to this, he must wait for an answer and keep it a secret from his father. Meanwhile, clouds gathered over one of the kingdom's mansions, and a thunderstorm began. In it, a young man reads a book, illuminated only by the bright light of lightning. It turns out to be the same Kai who showed loyalty to our heroine. However, now he notices that the magic has become distorted, and everything is not at all as it was before. Count Cole, Kai Vernon, resides in the northern lands of the kingdom of Garosfon. At this moment, the butler appears before him and asks him to forgive him for the sudden visit. But the man notices that Kai is not paying any attention to him. He decides to ask if everything is all right with the gentleman, and the count asks to get to the heart of the matter. The butler hands him a letter that was sent from the estate of Count Talaz, and they would like Kai to answer it as soon as possible. The sender is a girl, and this letter may be of a personal nature. Kai looks closely at the envelope and realizes that it is a message from Count Talaz's daughter. As far as he remembers, she is just an illegitimate child. I wonder what the girl wanted from Count Cole, whom she should not have met in this life. After this, he opens the letter and dives headfirst into its contents. At this point, the young man introduces the girl who wrote this message. A smile appears on his face, causing the butler to almost drop the decanter of tea. He had never seen the count smile before, and perhaps the letter was telling him something very secret. And Kai explains that the man is not thinking about that, and this is just a request for a visit. The girl possesses fire thunder magic and wants to hone her skills. The butler finds it strange that a girl from another family is involved in training. However, Kai explains that this is very similar to her, thus making it clear that he and Celine are familiar. After this, he asks the butler to prepare a paper to write a response. At the same time, the man pours tea for the count, and he peers closely into his cup. At that moment, Kai sees Celia's image in him and can no longer think of anything else. 10 days later, events unfold in the mansion where our heroine lives. Celia comes out of her room and walks down the hallway with her head held high. At this moment, one of the maids does not understand why this girl is treated with such respect. The house servant explains that Miss Celia has changed a lot in recent days. She severely scolded and punished servants who did not perform their duties properly. The maid can't believe her ears, because before the mistress always fawned on them, and now she has found her voice, and all the servants are on alert. At this moment, Celia passes by her subjects, and they bow their heads. Since the girl decided to start her life from scratch, she thought that there was no point in holding herself back any longer. So she simply showed the servants how to do their job properly. People change immediately after a person changes his attitude towards them. Until now, Celia was afraid to do this. But now everything has changed. The girl remembers the time when she was still a child. A banquet was being held in this huge house, and she watched with delight the luxury of the decorations and outfits. Suddenly, someone called her over, dismissively calling her the maid's daughter. It was her stepmother, who was outraged that Celia had appeared at the banquet. She strictly forbade her from attending the event and is now furious. Celia apologizes for her actions, but she could not resist the luxury of the banquet. But the stepmother drives her away, and Juliet says that her sister looks dirty, and the guests might think very badly of their family. She also adds that her stepsister's dress is very dirty and she stinks. And what finally finishes Celia off is that Juliet would be embarrassed if someone thought that they were from the same family. After this, the sister and stepmother leave for further celebration and leave the girl alone. In desperation, Celia begins to clutch her dress tightly and is unable to ask for help. As a child, she did not understand why she was not loved, because she had done nothing wrong. And it is indeed true that Count Tolas had an affair with her mother. But this does not mean that an illegitimate child should be subjected to violence and humiliation. However, the Countess did not skimp on insults and could even hit the girl. However, Celia inherited the magic and blood of the Tolas family, so she will not allow herself to be offended. At this time, the whole family gathered in the dining room to enjoy the meal. The Countess reports that they have been having problems lately. She is referring to Celia, whose behavior has changed greatly, according to the servants. The Count's son also adds that the girl began to visit the training ground frequently. The man was stunned by the news that his illegitimate daughter was participating in joint training. Juliet believes that Celia is doing this to spite the knights, and that nothing else can be expected from a commoner. But the woman, who is the oldest member of the family, thinks that her relatives are talking nonsense. She disagrees with the fact that Celia is being greatly devalued in this house. After all, you rarely meet such talented and beautiful girls like her. But the Countess is unhappy that her mother has sided with the commoner. Celia may be good-looking, but she is completely different from the rest with her hair and eye color. Her hair color and eyes are completely different from the Felix family and don't look like any of them. And from a very early age, the mother took care of the girl and was attached to her. That is why, in the Countess's opinion, she is now taking the side of an ordinary fool. But the Count asks Rose to stop talking about it and spoil everyone's appetite. At this moment, Celia enters the dining room and decides to ask why her grandmother's words had spoiled his mood so much. She believes that the Count was very rude and dared to call his mother's opinion unnecessary. Rose and her son are clearly unhappy with the girl's appearance, but they don't dare say a word. And the Count decides to inquire why his daughter suddenly decided to come. But for her, there is only one reason why she appeared in the dining room. Celia is a member of the family and decided to join the meal, as she has every right to do so. Nobody expected such words from the girl, and this leaves many in shock. Celia had never allowed herself such insolence before, and had always groveled before her family members. But now there is no trace left of that timid girl, which could become a serious problem for everyone. After this, Celia calmly sits down at the table, and no one dares to stop her. Juliet barely restrains herself from exploding with wild rage. Then the sister loudly reminds Celia that she is only an illegitimate child and cannot be a member of their family. However, the Count decides to curb his daughter's ardor, and the girl falls silent. The man is sure that Saya came here for some purpose, and he is interested in learning about her. Despite the cold reception, not a single muscle moved on the girl's face. Celia decides to remind her father that today she turned 17. This means that from this day on, the girl is considered a full-fledged adult. In other words, Celia can now decide for herself where she wants to live. But the Count considers this complete nonsense, since such freedom does not extend to women. At this point, the girl shows sadness on her face and seems to give up. However, at that very moment, Celia demonstrates her incredible magic to her family members. No one expected that a commoner would display the power of fire thunder. Even Juliet was amazed by her magic, which is clear proof of her belonging to the Felix family. For the average girl, the desire for freedom may seem like an unattainable right, but this clearly does not apply to those who possess the power of fiery thunder. And the girl's father still can't believe his eyes and his daughter's talents. But the demonstration of such force is irrefutable proof. What surprises the Count even more is that Celia has inherited the magic of the Tolas family. All the other family members begin to envy and do not understand why this power went to a commoner. And Celia just thinks her brother and sister are fools who don't deserve this. At this point, the Count's son begins to boil and calls the girl dirty. But no one can deny that Celia really does belong to the Tolas family. Her magic is a huge advantage that other relatives do not have. Even though Celia is an illegitimate daughter, she still has more rights to sit at this table. Fortunately, among all the envious and dissatisfied relatives, there is a grandmother who is happy about her granddaughter's success. And while everyone's appetite is completely ruined, Celia can enjoy delicious dishes. She pays no attention to her family members and focuses entirely on food. At this moment, a servant enters the dining room and addresses our heroine. The man reports that a letter has arrived for Mrs. Celia. The father immediately asks who this envelope is from, but the girl answers him with silence. After this, she opens the letter and reads the long-awaited answer. Meanwhile, Juliet is seething and cannot understand who this commoner could be communicating with. Celia doesn't notice her anger and immerses herself in the letter with pleasant emotions. There she reads Kai's response, which allows the girl to stay in his county. Celia is very happy that her friend from her past life treated her favorably. They used to be colleagues, but at this time they are still strangers to each other. Therefore, the girl was very worried and thought that Kai would refuse her request. And Juliet sees her sister's emotions and wonders if this letter is really that important to her. At this moment, Celia returns to reality and realizes that she shouldn't have shown her emotions so openly. Juliet dares to assume that this letter is from the knight, since the girl often visits the training ground. And Rose considers this to be a normal thing, since the mother of this ugly woman is also an ordinary commoner. And after this impudent woman still dares to waste their time at a family dinner. But Celia doesn't care about the insults from her family members, and they can say whatever they want. After everything she has been through since childhood, she no longer cares about them. She only tells her father that she intends to use the power of the fire thunder for the good of the Tolas family. And to improve her magic, she will need to go to Cole County for further training. And in the letter that was just brought to her, there is permission from His Excellency. At this point, Grandma begins to worry that Celia is going far north. She never expected that her granddaughter would leave home so early and leave her. At this moment, the Count jumps up from the table and calls his daughter Gisela. His mother doesn't understand who a man is addressing with such a name. Even Celia reminds her father that her name is completely different. And the Count gets even more angry and calls his daughter ungrateful. He says that all this time he raised her and gave her a home, and she just leaves like that. However, Celia is not going to remain silent and reports that everything was not like that at all. She has the power of the Tolas family, and she wants to learn to control it for the sake of her loved ones. Count Cole, however, possesses powerful magic and is considered the only one to have successfully completed the inheritance ceremony. This is very different from her family, which has continued to fail for 3 generations. The Count never expected to hear such words and couldn't even find what to answer. On the one hand, Celia's magic will indeed be useful for his family, but he doesn't want to let his daughter go, because then Cole's influence will be even stronger. But the Count cannot afford to give anyone even more power, and therefore does not allow Celia to leave. However, the girl had already made up her mind and was no longer going to follow her father's instructions. Although the Count begins to get very angry, he decides to contain his emotions. After this, he falls to his knees in front of his daughter and grabs her hand. The Count decides to change tactics and pretends to understand Celia's feelings. And he, as a father, is very worried about her and asks her not to leave her home. But for Celia, it is very disgusting to watch the Count lie straight to her face. So she pulls her hand away and pushes her kneeling father away from her. After this, the girl irritably explains that she will write reports to the family, and now she intends to finish dinner and goes to her room. At this point, the father is still trying to show his power and forbids the girl to leave the house. But for Celia, his words and orders no longer have any weight or value. After some time, deep night falls and the entire estate falls asleep. To prevent his daughter from escaping, the Count ordered that a guard be posted at the entrance. At the same time, he placed maids in Celia's room to watch her. Although it is already night outside, the girl cannot allow herself to fall asleep. She didn't think that her father would follow her and refused to let her go. After this, she carefully gets out of bed and freezes in place when one of the maids begins to wake up. Celia's heart nearly sank into her boots, but fortunately, the maid continued to sleep soundly. Now is the perfect time to escape from this family. The girl sneaks into the stable and remains unnoticed. Now she can say goodbye to Felix's house and start living for herself. With these thoughts, our heroine mounts her horse and gallops away. But Celia's disappearance becomes known, and the knights set out to search for her. Now their task is to bring the girl back alive and well. The knights mount their horses and set off after the Count's runaway daughter. Meanwhile, Celia is only thinking about how she needs to leave Talaz County as soon as possible. In this race, she starts screaming because she has no strength left at all. Celia falls onto her horse and seems ready to give up and stop fighting. She is so tired that she has no strength to continue her journey. Was she really so weak that a short distance was her limit? At this moment, the girl looks back and sees that the knights are starting to catch up with her. The guards are so close that Celia can easily see their faces. Suddenly, she gets a second wind and grabs the reins again. Although she is not very physically fit, the girl still manages to escape from her pursuers. After some time, our heroine finds herself in a dense forest and is trying to catch her breath after a long chase. The girl dismounts from her horse and decides to regain at least a little strength. It's worth remembering that she's only 17 years old, and her preparation leaves much to be desired. She was so pathetic in this race that at this rate it will be hard for her to escape. At that moment, she sees in front of her one of the knights who is looking for her. However, Celia takes out a dagger and is not going to give up so easily. After this, she shouts to the knights about what is right under their noses. Several men approach the girl and hope to get her back. First, they invite Miss Celia to get up and come back to the house with them. The knight does not want to hurt the girl and hopes that she will surrender voluntarily. But the girl explains that they cannot expect obedience from her. After this, the knights look at each other nervously. They then take out their swords and make it clear to the girl that they will bring her back to the house by force. In the forest, Celia is unable to use her magic and decides to make the first move. After all, this is the only way to win the next battle, and she has no other choice. After this, the girl attacks one of the knights and wounds him with a dagger. The man falls to the ground, and Celia decides to deal with the rest. The second knight is horrified and never expected this from a 17-year-old girl. Meanwhile, Celia attacks the enemy, who defends himself with his spear. But our heroine's skills turn out to be much better, and she pushes the knight to the ground. The girl apologizes and says that she has no desire to go back. Meanwhile, one of the knights does not understand where the simple lady gets such movements from. And why does a girl who is not used to fighting fight on par with experienced warriors? At that very moment, he begins to consider all this complete nonsense and begins to attack. The knight kicks Celia in the back, and she falls sharply to the ground. After this, the man raises his sword and tells our heroine that this is the end. The enemy is right behind the disarmed girl, and it seems that she has no chance. The girl turns around and realizes that her plan has completely failed. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a magical force appears and turns the ground into ice. The knight who had just raised his sword against Celia finds himself immobilized. At this moment, the girl cannot believe that all this is happening to her. After all, such power can only belong to one person in this kingdom. As expected, Kai appears nearby on his horse, who used icing magic. But Celia still doesn't understand why he was here at this particular moment. Meanwhile, Kai helps our heroine get up and asks if everything is okay with her. He advises the knights not to move, otherwise their legs will be broken. Indeed, Kai's magic froze the feet of one of them and made it impossible for them to move. But the knight does not give up and asks the man not to interfere with them carrying out the orders of Count Tolas. However, Celia Felix is a guest of the Cole estate and is now under his protection. Therefore, he does not care whose orders the knights carry out, and he will not allow the girl to be treated like that. It also makes no difference to him where his guest is at that moment. Kai explains that this was a warning, and the knights must report this to their master. After this, he mounts his horse and performs magic. The knight is blinded by a bright light and has to cover his face with his hands. Then Kai and Celine head away from this seedy place. The girl thanks Mr. Cole for saving her and asks how he ended up here. And Kai explains that he arrived in the lands of Talaz in order to pick up Celia. Since the gifted girl asked him for help, he could not refuse it. Kai starts to smile and says that he is very glad that he made it on time. The girl almost never saw him smile and thanks her savior with all her heart. However, from the Cole territory to Tolaz, it is a full 5 days' ride on horseback. In that case, Celia doesn't understand how Kai ended up here so quickly. At this moment, our heroes approach the huge stones standing on the field, and Kai explains that he used the gate to quickly move. He is surprised that the owner of the Fiery Thunder does not know about this. Only those who have successfully passed the inheritance ceremony can use the gate. It is a ritual performed by the head of one of the 4 counties and has magical powers. If a person does not possess magic, then he will not be able to successfully complete the ritual. Tola's county has been failing since Celia's great-grandfather's time, and there are things her family hasn't told her. And Kai explains that there is nothing to worry about, and now the girl will be able to see everything herself. But Celia can't believe that a man decided to support her. They used to argue all the time, but now Kai behaves completely differently. After this, our heroes stop among huge stones and dismount from their horses. Kai then takes a knife in his hand and cuts one of his fingers with it. At this moment, blood begins to ooze from the wound and drips onto the stone. Suddenly, everything around is illuminated by such a bright light that Celia has to cover her eyes with her hand. And Kai reports that the gates are now activated and it's time for them to leave. From the outside it looks a bit scary, but our heroine now has only one path. So she plucks up her courage and resolutely follows Kai. Celia enters the magical gate and has no idea what awaits her next. But events in his past life showed that this man could be trusted. Meanwhile, Mr. Cole's butler is patiently waiting for him outside. Together with his servants, he stands in the middle of the field on which the gates are located. At this moment, they are activated, and this means that his master will appear soon. After this, all the servants bow their heads and greet their master. Kai passes through the gate on his horse, and it seems as if he is alone. But after the man dismounts from his horse, the butler notices a girl with him. The gates close, and now Celia can feel safe. Meanwhile, Kai explains to the butler that this girl is his guest. At this moment, all the servants begin to feel delighted and embarrassed. But Mr. Cole makes it clear that Celia is just a guest, and that it is better to forget about romantic ideas. And our heroine at this time understands that even the servants love Kai. After this, the butler offers Celia to hand him the reins of the horse. The girl decides that this is the right moment and says her name. Martin, in turn, introduces himself to the guest and says that it is an honor for him to serve her. He then tells Mr. Cole that the servants have already prepared a room for the mistress in the main building. After this, Kai extends his hand to Celia and asks her to follow him. Never before had the girl seen her colleague so friendly. It all seems so amazing to her that it is difficult to move. Celia could not imagine that someone would accompany her. After all, until now she had been addressed only as a knight and not as a lady. Kai notices his guest's confusion and decides to ask if everything is okay. At this point, Celia comes to her senses from the shock and reports that she is fine. After this, the girl carefully extends her hand to Kai's hand. The man gently squeezes her hand and makes it clear that he can be trusted. Until this day, the relationship between Kai and our heroine had never been so close. Sometime later, Celia finds herself in the majestic county of Cole. Kai escorts the lady through the corridors of his house and takes her to a private room. Finally, they stop at the door that leads to Celia's chambers. Kai decides to leave his guest alone so she can rest. He also really wants God to bless Celia in the future. Cole wishes his guest good night, and the girl thanks him for it. After this, Kai leaves, and Celia cannot move for some time. Everything that happened today shocked her so much that she can't come to her senses. Finally, this long night ends, and dawn begins in the county. Early in the morning, Celia goes to Kai's office, where he is already waiting for the girl. The man is very happy to see his guest, and asks if she has had time to rest. After last night, Celia, surprisingly, managed to recover quickly and feels cheerful. And all this thanks to the care and efforts of Kai, who provided the girl with all the conditions. Celia is also grateful to him for the wonderful dress he gave her, but Kai felt sorry that the only dress in this house belonged to his mother. Next time, he promises to buy something new and asks the girl to sit on the sofa. As far as he understood, Celia wanted to improve her magical abilities in his county. However, not every girl would dare to train in someone else's estate. But Celia has mastered the magic of fire thunder, and this radically changes the matter. The Talaz family is one of 4 counties whose lineage inherits this ability, but none of her relatives ever learned to use this valuable gift. Celia believes that Tolaz County will not be able to properly educate her, and that her talent will simply rot. Kai believes that the decision to leave home was not an easy one for his guest. However, she is an illegitimate child and lives in a country where pedigree is valued. Even if Celia hones her skills, her efforts may not be rewarded. However, our heroine is ready to take risks and is not afraid of any difficulties. Kai even becomes curious about why Celia is ready to fight so desperately, and the girl becomes thoughtful. In her past life, she would have answered without hesitation that it was all for Monsieur Claude. He was everything to her, and our heroine saw in him the meaning of her life. After all, Celia was happy at the time when she loved this man, but now she is ready to overcome any difficulties solely for herself, and she will no longer allow anyone to control her own life. After these words, Kai says that he guarantees Celia's safety and education. However, his help will not be free, and the Count has some conditions. In exchange for training, Kai wants to get a decent result from his guest. Will she be able to achieve the effect that will satisfy those around her? Celia thought for a moment, but promised Kai that she would handle it. After this, the Count decides to ask the girl what she plans to do in the future. Our heroine hesitated at this question, as she didn't know the answer. She has no influence or status, and her only weapon is fiery thunder. However, there are things that only the owners of this ability can do. After this, Celia boldly and slowly declares to Kai who she really wants to become. Her goal is to gain the status of Countess of Talaz, which sounds like madness. But in this life, Celia intends to radically change her future. She is firmly convinced that such status will help her obtain protection. Therefore, our heroine does not intend to retreat and is ready to do everything for her goal. To strengthen the power of the head, it is necessary to show one's strength at the succession ceremony. The head of the family becomes the one who has the family ability. When Celia was a knight, she never thought about becoming a leader. But in the current situation, it is very important for her to gain power in order to survive. And the plan to become the head of the family is the only best option for Celia in this life. Therefore, our heroine agrees to Kai's offer to undergo the inheritance ceremony. This will be the fastest way to achieve your goal. After this, Kai takes the teapot and pours the hot drink into the mug. He explains that for the owner of the Fire Thunder, this is a good option. Kai then takes the mug of tea in his hands and hands it to his guest. Celia wants the world to know the true value and significance of the Felix family. She thanks Kai for the opportunity and says that she will definitely repay him. Now the girl can't wait to start her studies, but Kai asks her to slow down, since he can't teach her magic right now. The reason is that Celia is still physically too weak. The girl is outraged by these words, and she never expected to hear such a description of herself. But the use of force is a heavy burden for a fragile organism, and Kai cannot allow Celia to destroy her own body, despite her desire to learn magic as soon as possible. Until he gives his permission, our heroine is forbidden to use magic. So 4 months fly by, and one day the students begin their training. Celia is also among them, and is honing her close combat skills. But instead of a live partner, there is an ordinary mannequin in front of her. At this moment, she looks up and notices a surprising phenomenon. Snow begins to fall from the sky. Although it is only October, one of the young men from the training ground notices the girl's surprise and says that this is a common thing in the north. But Thomas asks not to worry, since the snow doesn't stay there for very long. Although it can be very cold here, the stranger should soon get used to it. Now, Thomas puts his sword in front of him and challenges the girl to a fight. A training fight begins between them, and Celia very skillfully repels the attacks. Thomas is surprised and decides to ask where our heroine learned to fencing. And the girl replies that she managed to practice a little at her house. At this moment, Celia uses a crushing and dexterous move and knocks the sword out of the guy's hands. Thomas is amazed at how trained his partner is and what incredible moves she has. After this, he finds himself lying on the ground and realizes that he is not at all up to her skills. And Celia realizes that Kai was actually right about her again. In her past life, she had mastered her magic perfectly. But then the girl was a knight. And now, for 4 months, Celia has not used force and has simply built up her physical strength. While our heroine is distracted by her thoughts, Thomas suddenly attacks and knocks the sword out of her hands. Despite her talents, Celia finds herself disarmed by her own carelessness. After this, Thomas states that the girl lacks physical strength, and from tomorrow, he will increase her training for her legs and back. But the maids ask the young man to stop this, since it is already hard for the mistress. They brought baskets of food and announced that it was time for the boys to take a break. Everyone was very happy to have a snack and stopped their training. Celia had never felt such unity before, as she had always been alone in her home. And now she is happy to have the opportunity to enjoy a delicious snack together. The girl sits down on the soft carpet next to her new friends to enjoy the food. At this time, Kai is carefully watching our heroine from the window. After this, he decides to go down and heads straight to Celia. Kai asks about the girl's progress, and Thomas talks about her talents in training. The Count did not expect to hear words of praise and considers such growth incredible. After this, he offers Celia to use magic, and she can hardly contain her joy. She has been waiting for this moment for so long that she agrees without hesitation. After some time, Kai takes his charges out into an open field. He wants to see Celia's skills and asks her to release all her power. The girl concentrates and prepares to show everything she is capable of. To use the power, she needs to remember sensations from a past life. After this, Celia becomes immersed in the events that happened to her during the war. The girl reproduces the power of the fiery thunder that is in her hand. The flames gradually begin to grow and envelop our heroine. Suddenly, the image of Claude, whom she once loved, appears before her eyes. This makes Celia feel again everything that brought her so much pain. Meanwhile, Kai notices that the girl's power is gradually swirling into a powerful whirlwind. He tries to call Celia, but all her thoughts are now only about betrayal. The fire begins to burn even more intensely, and Kai decides to stop our heroine. However, now nothing can stop the girl's memories and return her to reality. The faces of the people who furiously wanted her dead come to mind. Just like last time, she feels an unbearable pain in her chest. Celia feels as hot as when her body was burned at the stake. And all this is because of those close to us who, without a twinge of conscience, betrayed our heroine. Celia can't cope with these emotions and almost goes crazy. Suddenly, Kai finally brings the girl back to reality and stops her torment. But he just can't understand what caused his ward's behavior. Surrounded by fiery flames, they can burn alive in a matter of seconds. Kai hugs Celia all this time to somehow protect her. At this time, the knights simply watch the master with horror and cannot help him in any way. Kai decides to use his icing magic and stop the fire from spreading. He gathers all his strength into a fist and directs it high up. In a matter of seconds, an ice cliff rises above our heroes, protecting them from the fire. After this, the fire flame begins to die out, and the ice finally melts. Luckily, this time, Celia was lucky again that Kai was there. After eliminating the danger, the knights immediately rush to our heroes. And Celia still can't come to terms with the memories of her death. All those feelings that she experienced while burning alive still haunt her. The voices of people who wanted her dead still continue to sound in her head. Kai is very frightened by the girl's condition and helps her rise a little from the ground. Celia is still in terrible pain, and the Count asks her to breathe in and out slowly. After seeing this, he realizes that the girl's power is too unstable, and failure to control it can be fatal. But there is definitely some explanation and reason for everything that happened. At this moment, our heroine tries to cuddle up to the only person who is nearby. With tears in her eyes, she says that she no longer wants to die. Without realizing it, Celia asks not to be burned at the stake anymore. The girl begins to become very hysterical and screams that she wants to live. From such tension, her consciousness gradually begins to fade. The girl's body becomes limp, and she slowly falls to the ground. Some time later, Celia is taken unconscious to her room, where she continues to lie silently in bed. There is a maid next to her who closely monitors the condition of our heroine. Kai also did not leave Celia's room the whole time, and even managed to fall asleep from the long wait. And the girl sleeps peacefully in her bed and sees not the best memories in her dreams. In one of them, the father takes her away from her grandmother and declares that he will personally raise his illegitimate daughter. After this, they began to treat her with disdain, and even the servants did not hide their hostility. Little Celia was brought spoiled food that was impossible to eat. At the same time, everyone pretended that the girl's lunch was exactly the same as everyone else's. The countess had no compassion for the daughter of her husband's mistress and advised her to appreciate the luxury in which she lived. So Celia had to eat what they gave her and not complain. After some time, her life changed, and the girl found herself among the knights. Her power was on par with the greatest mage from Cole County. It was on the battlefield that she met Monsieur Claude. At that time, it was still unclear who first noticed each other, but there is no doubt that Celia fell completely in love with this man. However, this romantic story did not last long, and the girl had to face betrayal. It turned out to be a tragedy, after which our heroine was unjustly subjected to the most painful death. Even in her sleep, she cannot contain the pain she experienced. At this moment, Celia begins to feel a slight chill, and it calms her down. Kai uses his magic to ease the girl's condition. Suddenly, she opens her eyes and doesn't understand why Kai is leaning over her. The man says that he is very glad that she woke up, as Celia had slept for a very long time. This made him worry and be concerned about the condition of his ward. However, Celia does not remember at all what happened to her today. Only fragments flash through her head, and she apologizes for what happened. But Kai blames himself first and foremost, since it was he who allowed the girl to use magic. After this, he states that magical power is deeply connected to the user's mind and body. And Celia realizes that by not knowing about her problem, she provoked this situation. It is indeed difficult to use magic without having a stable mind. Therefore, Kai suggests that Celia had previously suffered an injury that led her to this outcome. The Count hopes that the girl will tell him what really happened to her. But how can Celia tell him the whole truth if it sounds like nonsense? Looking at Kai, the girl understands that she will not be sincere with him, and what kind of person would believe that she was burned at the stake and then return to the past? It would be a big mistake for Celia to say such stupid things. After this, our heroine tries to think of something, but words don't come to her mind. Kai notices this and realizes that he should give Celia time to open up to him, and when the wounds on her heart heal, she will be able to control her abilities better. The Count wants his ward to move at her own pace and not worry about anything. Celia did not expect this kind of treatment and feels relieved. After everything she's been through, this kind of support feels like a breath of fresh air. Meanwhile, events unfold in the royal palace. Since early morning, the servant has been unable to knock on the door of His Highness the Prince. But at this time, he is not sleeping alone, but with another long-haired beauty. The servant decides to go inside and discovers a stranger in his bed. Finally, the prince wakes up and tells the servant that he is too noisy. But today, there will be a banquet and His Highness will have to prepare for it. After this, the servant emphasizes his master's mood. This is the first time in 3 years that the prince has taken part in such an event, and he should be enjoying himself. However, for His Highness, such logic is utter nonsense. Although, the presence of Kai Vernon at this event really lifts the prince's spirits. Meanwhile, he stands near the window in his county and watches intently. At that moment, he sees a man on a white horse, accompanied by knights. Afterwards, Kai remembers Celia's tears as she became lost in her memories. Our hero clenches his fist tightly, feeling incredible anger. This time, he would never let Celia die at the hands of the vile Claude. Meanwhile, the preparations for the most important person continue at the royal palace. The prince is given his suit, in which he can go to the banquet. However, right now, all his thoughts are not occupied with clothes or preparations. Claude thinks about Kai Vernon, who is the head of one of the 4 counties. This man is distinguished by his outstanding talents and wealth. At the same time, many people treat him more favorably than Claude. Everything the prince wants is already in the hands of his main competitor. This makes Claude incredibly angry, and he can't wait to meet Kai. The prince is not at all concerned about the upcoming banquet and the preparations for it, since the only thing that matters to him now is his own position. Meanwhile, the servant asks the master to hurry, as Claude risks being late for the celebration. Although it is troublesome, the event is still held in honor of the founding of the Kingdom of Garosfon. This is a good opportunity to demonstrate the prince's influence to everyone. But Claude considers other people to be trash, who don't risk their lives on the battlefield and think only of themselves. Although the servant is a little upset by these words, he is still not surprised. Meanwhile, the prince continues to demonstrate complete indifference to everything on his face. Although he is very excited to imagine the upcoming meeting, he does not even show these emotions. At this time, events unfold in Mr. Cole's county. Kai is in the office with his butler and Celia. A knight comes to him with a message and hands the man a letter. This is an invitation to a banquet, and it looks like Claude has decided to attend this year too. Hearing this name, Celia felt as if she had plunged into cold water. The girl is not at all thrilled that Claude will be present at the banquet. After all, in her past life, she met the prince at this very event. Our heroine was also 17 years old then, just like she is now. But if before Claude seemed to her like a ray of light in this world, now her opinion about this traitor has changed radically. Now Celia would never want to meet this man again. In this case, she decides that the only way out is to simply avoid contact with him. After this, Celia turns to Kai and decides to inquire about declining the invitation. But the Count considers this impossible, since the girl is the daughter of Count Talaz and cannot ignore this banquet. Celia knows this, however. She decides to report her relationship to her family. Since they are not the best, our heroine is afraid of embarrassing herself in front of everyone. But Kai promises that he will always be there for Celia and support her. The girl will also attend this banquet on behalf of Cole County and their family. However, Celia is worried about her teacher's decision. After all, she has her own family, and it would be more logical to attend the event on her behalf. And Kai explains that he has no family and needs an escort. Therefore, he would be very glad if Celia agreed to go with him. The girl cannot refuse Kai, although she is very worried about meeting Mr. Claude. But the current situation is fundamentally different from what it was in the past. Celia decides that she can overcome this challenge and agrees to accompany the Count to the banquet. At this point, the butler intervenes in the conversation and says that this is excellent news. They have little time left as they need to prepare for the event. The butler's attitude is so serious that it even frightens our heroine a little. After this, Celia goes to a store where chic dresses are on display. Together with the Count and his servants, they look for a suitable outfit for our heroine. The maid finds the dress and thinks that it will perfectly highlight all of Celia's advantages. The butler offers his outfit and says that the first thing to do is to emphasize the elegance and beauty of the hair. A heated argument breaks out between the servants about whose dress is better. After that, they decide to ask Celia herself for her opinion in order to choose the winner. But the girl reports that both dresses are beautiful and thus maintains peace between the servants. However, the butler does not give up and explains that the burgundy dress suits our heroine better. At this point, Kai joins the conversation and adds that Celia looks beautiful in any outfit. The servants did not expect such a compliment to the girl from their master. All this certainly suggests that the Count clearly has strong feelings for his guest. Celia notices the awkward atmosphere around her and even blushes with embarrassment. After this, the butler decides to ask the gentleman which outfit is best to take. Kai buys both dresses and asks the seller to pack them quickly. This store is clearly very expensive, and Celia is not happy with this waste of money. However, Kai promised his guest to buy a new dress, and he did it. But Celia considers this a very expensive purchase and would not like such gifts. At this point, Kai informs the girl that she doesn't have to worry about it at all. After this, he shows her another dress, in which Celia will accompany him to the banquet. Kai asks to simply accept these outfits, since for the Cole family, it is not such an expense. No one had ever given our heroine such gifts before, and she sincerely thanks the Count. For the first time in all this time, she feels truly happy. Kai asks Martin if all this will be enough for the lady, but the butler informs that several more dresses need to be sewn for the girl. Celia was so eager to talk Kai out of buying her more clothes that she accidentally said his name. Everyone was shocked by such a direct appeal to the gentleman, including the heroine herself. But after that, Kai just smiles sweetly and says that he understood everything. Sometime later, the events unfold in the capital of Garosfan, which is generously decorated for the upcoming event. A rich and beautiful carriage, in which our heroes are, drives up to the castle. Kai comes out of it first, and his appearance immediately attracts attention. Celia follows him out in her new red dress, which brings out the color of her hair. Together, they look like a real couple, who will have no equal at this event. The banquet in honor of the founding day of the Kingdom of Garosfan is officially declared open. A large number of noble aristocrats gathered in the huge hall, but all of them pale in comparison to the pair of our heroes who have just appeared. The girls see Count Cole accompanied by a stranger and immediately ask if they are engaged. At this point, the event organizer announces the new arrivals and names Celia and Kai. After this, everyone remembers that the girl is the illegitimate daughter of Count Tolaz. At that very second, everyone present begins to discuss our heroine. Although Celia's ears were burning terribly, she was still prepared for this. It was clear to her from the very beginning that the girls would hate her. For all noble ladies, Kai is the ideal marriage partner. However, she would feel more at ease if the women discussed her more quietly. Kai notices his companion's nervousness, and the girl explains that she is simply not used to increased attention. Previously, everyone avoided her and even ignored her, but now she is at the center of discussions. After this, Celia asks how Kai feels in such a situation. Since the age of 7, he has attended this banquet every year and has felt uncomfortable every time. Even now, after so many years, he feels awkward being here. Sometimes Kai wishes his parents were alive and supporting him in moments like these. But from a very early age, he had to lose them and fully experience loneliness. Even children are required to take part in the banquet if they are the head of the county. Celia realizes that Kai feels out of place too, and she didn't even know it. However, the Count explains that he is much better this year thanks to the girl. Meanwhile, all the other ladies can't hide their displeasure with Cole's new companion. At this moment, the organizer announces the appearance of His Excellency. Celia sees this as a great chance to get rid of the haters' gaze. Kai agrees with her, since now all the attention will shift to the royal family. After this, the doors to the hall open, and everyone eagerly awaits the appearance of important people. Finally, the king comes forward, and behind him, his elegant wife. Prince Claude, who betrayed Celia, appears at the banquet with them. If our heroine were asked who she would least like to see right now, it would be him. Meanwhile, Claude walks forward with a swagger, demonstrating his special status to everyone. All those present begin to bow, saluting the royal family. At this moment, the prince notices an unusual girl out of the corner of his eye. It turns out to be Celia, whose beauty particularly attracts attention. But the prince doesn't show that he's interested in the stranger and passes by. However, now the girl will not allow herself to follow the same path as in her past life. After a while, the formal atmosphere gives way to joyful fun. Kai decides to spend some time with the royal family and socialize. And Celia at this moment remains alone, since she does not particularly want to contact anyone. Suddenly, one of her acquaintances catches the girl and disturbs her peace. A figure with red, wavy hair approaches our heroine. After this, Celia sees her stepmother and the envious Juliet in front of her. Rose was surprised and would never have thought that her stepdaughter would decide to run away from the Tolaz family and appear in such a place. It's even interesting what prompted this dirty half-breed to do such a thing. As always, Celia's family continues to ridicule and humiliate her, and our heroine explains that, unfortunately, she was unable to say goodbye to the girls properly. However, they must realize that all this was done for the sake of the Tolaz family. But Juliet doesn't believe her sister and considers her training to be just an excuse. At this moment, the girl grabs Celia by the dress and begins to insult her. Juliet believes that her sister simply ran away to her lover, and nothing more was expected of her. But Celia warns the girl to watch her tongue, and instead, she will ask His Excellency for an apology. Frightened by this, Juliet asks her sister not to be angry and thinks that she caught a star. And at this moment, Celia realizes that enough time has passed since she left. But since then, her family members have not changed at all and still take pleasure in humiliating others. These thoughts make our heroine stop responding and continue thinking. Juliet doesn't like her silence and demands that she say something. After this, Celia apologizes and says that she was just thinking that the girls haven't changed at all. She has no romantic relationship with Count Cole and accompanies him as a member of the family. But Juliet calls her sister a liar, who can't be just a student wearing such a dress. However, there is only one reason why Tolaz County can maintain its current status. Julie believes that this is only possible because of the nobility of their family. But in fact, Tolaz's position is held by the feature of fire thunder. With each generation, the magic of the family weakens and will soon disappear altogether. Therefore, the existence of Tolaz now directly depends on Celia's abilities. Although the head of the family tries to save the situation, he will not be able to do anything. Now that Celia has laid it all out for the girls, they should understand. The stepmother is a wise woman, and she clearly will not deny such obvious things. After this conversation, Celia leaves her relatives and asks for forgiveness. The girl leaves, as she sees no point in their further useless conversation. Then, Celia goes outside and sits down on a bench with the maid. Today made her very nervous, and the girl feels very tired. The maid really wants to help her mistress and offers to bring her a drink. Celia thanks the girl, and she immediately leaves her to return with a drink. Suddenly, a man appears in front of our heroine, who did not expect to meet anyone in this place. A slight fear can be seen on Celia's face from meeting this person. After all, this person turns out to be Claude, whom she would least like to meet right now. Meanwhile, the music from the banquet hall can be heard even on the street. The event is in full swing, and the prince does not understand why the girl is alone on the street. But Celia doesn't want to enter into a dialogue with Claude at all now. And if there was an opportunity, she would gladly run away from there. After this, she remembers a moment from her past life when she found herself at this banquet. Then Celia again found herself an uninvited guest at another celebration. Feeling lonely and downtrodden, she decided to leave this place. The girl went out into the dark corridor and plunged into her thoughts. No matter how hard she tried to ignore the gossip, she couldn't do it. After this, she raises her head up and pays attention to one portrait. The girl decides to use the power of thunder to add at least a little light to this room. At that moment, she sees in the portrait the first count of the Tolaz family, Mr. Jan Felix. He was a great man who supported the king with his ability. Celia inherited this power and can now use it for good. But unfortunately, right now the power of her magic is too weak and undeveloped. Suddenly, Celia is caught by a man who is amazed by her power of fire thunder. The girl immediately hides her hand and pretends as if nothing happened. This man turns out to be Prince Claude, and this is his first meeting with our heroine. The girl is very scared that he still managed to see her ability. Claude demands to know about the fire thunder, and Celia tells him that he got it right. The man cannot believe that a girl can use such an ability. It was a great surprise for him to see a man with such magic. Celia thought Claude would treat her with disdain and did not expect any other reaction. After this, the second prince decides to meet the girl and asks her name. Claude had not heard of her before, as Celia had not had the opportunity to attend social events until now. That is why, until this day, the prince and our heroine had never met face to face. After assessing the girl's appearance and her cheap outfit, Claude decides that it doesn't matter now. After this, he asks Celia not to worry about everything that happened. However, if the girl's father had found out about her conversation with the second prince, he would have scolded her. Claude is surprised to hear that he could be the cause of someone's problems. Celia honestly admits that her family considers her a disgrace and hides her from noble people. But the prince says that her birth is not important at all, since the girl possesses the greatest gift. And with such a gift, Celia should keep her back straight, not fearing anyone. For the first time in her life, our heroine hears words that provide her with support. And Claude adds that Celia is much more valuable than she can imagine. This was the first meeting between our heroine and the second prince, who treated her favorably. His Highness was so kind that Celia had never encountered anything like it before. She feels happy, although she tries not to show her emotions. After this, Claude extends his hand to the girl and asks her to follow him. The man explains that he really needs a loyal comrade who will follow him, and if Celia is nearby, she will be able to use her power without any problems. After this, our heroine returns to reality, where Claude stands before her again. At that time, the girl was fascinated by this man and made a stupid decision. Now she decides to leave here because she does not want to let the prince use her. At this moment, Celia gets up from the bench and does not say a word. She silently turns her back to the prince and is about to leave his company. But suddenly, Claude decides to stop the owner of the fiery thunder and asks her to wait. Celia turns her gaze to him, and the man remembers that the girl was with Cole. He didn't know that Kai had blood relatives, and he was curious about who the girl was to him. And Celia gives her name and explains that the master is simply teaching her magic. Now Claude realizes that the girl actually comes from the Tola's family. Their current generation has very weak magical power and cannot properly use fire thunder. However, what was this Cole up to if he took on the task of training the owner of such a gift? All this brings a sly smile to Claude's face and a desire to solve this puzzle. At this boring banquet, he found something truly valuable for the first time, and Celia feels that she doesn't want to talk to this man anymore. She decides to end the conversation and says that she cannot afford to steal His Highness's time. But after such a discovery, Claude cannot simply let the girl go. The man grabs Celia by the hand, and this behavior scares her a little. Our heroine met the prince again at this banquet, although she wanted to avoid it at all costs. Meanwhile, the prince takes Celia's hand and slowly brings it towards him. Then he kisses her and makes it clear that he doesn't want to break up with the girl. Having finished kissing her hand, Claude explains that he has not yet finished talking to Celia. But our heroine is so alarmed by what is happening that she would like it all to be a joke. However, she cannot even move from her place, as she is frozen from shock. Meanwhile, a red-haired girl watches the couple from the palace window. It turns out to be Juliet, who so dreamed of being alone with Claude. She deliberately followed the prince, but found him and his sister in such a romantic atmosphere. Out of envy and anger, she bites her finger and can't do anything. Meanwhile, Celia is only thinking about how to escape from there. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an arrow appears and flies straight towards the couple. Celia reacts instantly to the danger, and the arrow hits the ground. Could it really be that on such a day the enemy decided to attack and kill the second prince? Celia's instincts immediately kick in, and she stands up for Claude. Meanwhile, the arrows continue to fly towards our heroine. At this moment, the girl begins to use the power of thunder and asks the prince to hide. However, until this moment, Claude had no idea that Celia possessed such a gift. Moreover, her ability is at such a level that at her age it is simply impossible. And at that moment, Celia deftly deals with the arrows and turns them into ashes. After this, the knights run up to the prince and see that His Highness is fine. The men immediately take up arms and set off to look for the offenders. But one of the knights still remains with the prince to ensure his safety. Claude had just returned from the battlefield, and an assassination attempt had already been made on him. The prince begins to scold the knight, as they were careless in guarding the palace. After this, the man again turns to Celia, who cannot escape from him. The prince thanks his savior, thanks to whom he remained alive. Our heroine is, of course, glad that no one hurt the prince. However, she moved unconsciously and did not want to interfere with it. But she did it anyway, and now the royal family won't leave her alone. It is worth seeing Claude's delight, who is amazed by the girl's abilities. After this, Celia explains that she still has a lot to learn, and Claude comes even closer to the girl and asks her to stop being shy. Then he places his palm on her face and slowly runs it down her cheek. The second prince explains that the girl was in complete control of the situation today. Luckily, at that moment, Cole and his servants appear nearby. Celia turns around and is finally free from her seclusion with the prince. Judging by Kai's face, he and Claude clearly don't have a friendly relationship. At this time, the maid begins to cry and says that she is sorry that the mistress was alone all this time. Everyone already knows about the attack that took place, and Kai asks if Celia is injured. Luckily, the girl is okay, and this calms Mr. Cole down. After this, he switches to the second prince and asks how he ended up here. The man explains that because of his absence, the king became very angry. But fortunately, this time there were no incidents, and we can breathe a sigh of relief. However, next time, Claude should not forget about his position. The second prince is displeased that Kai allows himself to make such statements. After all, for him, he is still a disgusting person who is just a count, and Cole explains that he doesn't care at all how His Highness behaves. But if he offends his guest in any way, there will be no forgiveness. At that moment, Celia felt like she was in seventh heaven. However, Claude does not understand why his opponent is behaving this way towards him. But looking at Celia, everything immediately becomes obvious to him. Cole's behavior clearly has something to do with this girl he's protecting. Now he became even more interested in Celia, who possessed fiery thunder. After this, Claude's deepest desire became to get this girl. After all, then he will be able to use her as a puppet and make his dreams come true. Claude can't even contain his emotions and starts laughing loudly. He needs Celia to achieve his goals, and the prince must get her. After this, Claude says that it was fate that brought about their meeting. At this moment, the prince takes the girl's hand, paying no attention to Cole. The man wants to ask Celia to dance and spend time with her. Kai hears all this and begins to hate this impudent prince even more. After this, Celia turns to His Highness to give an answer. Claude can't wait to take advantage of the moment and make a simple girl fall in love with him. But Celia says that she is very sorry and cannot accept the invitation. After all, she is His Excellency's partner and came to the banquet with him. However, Claude cannot believe that Cole is a higher priority for the girl than the prince. For Celia, it doesn't matter that the prince of the kingdom stands before her, and her choice is obvious. At this time, Juliet continues to eavesdrop on the conversation between her sister and her idol. She almost chews off her entire finger from anger and incredible envy. And in the banquet hall, the festivities and aristocratic dancing continue. All couples feel very happy at this celebration. Kai also decides not to stand aside and invites his companion to dance. Celia is a little embarrassed, but gladly accepts the count's invitation. After this, they begin to whirl in a dance, so that it is impossible to take your eyes off them. All this time, Claude cannot understand why this girl chose Cole as her partner. Without thinking, he decides that he also needs to find someone to dance with. He sees a red-haired girl next to him and invites her to become his partner. This girl turns out to be Juliet, who cannot believe her success. All this time, she has been following in Claude's footsteps, and finally, he is ready to offer her his hand to dance. She tells the prince that she is very happy to receive an invitation from him. Juliet states her name and expresses admiration for the second prince. However, Claude pays no attention to his partner and looks away throughout the entire dance. Juliet also decides to look there and cannot believe her eyes. All this time, the second prince does not take his eyes off the couple Celia and Mr. Cole. At this moment, the girl looks like the star of this holiday and is incredibly beautiful. Juliet is furious that all of her idol's attention is focused on her stepsister, and Celia and Kai continue to dance as if there was no one else at this event. People are amazed at how warmly the count treats this girl. All this time, Claude continues to keep his eyes on our couple. Together with Juliet, they remain in the background of this celebration. And while Kai and Celia are having a good time, the prince decides to finish his dance. He leaves Juliet without saying a word before leaving. Today was supposed to be the debut of Felix's daughter, but everything didn't go according to plan. Because of Celia's measure, her dance is ruined, and the prince pays no attention to Juliet. Today, His Highness became her first dance partner. However, during all this time, he never even looked at Juliet. In her opinion, Celia, who is nothing special, is to blame for everything again. But for some reason, today all the attention is focused on her and not on Juliet. Because of this dirty girl, her whole life instantly went downhill. A few days earlier, Julia had asked her father if he was really going to Valtar. It was a shock to her that the count was planning to go to a dangerous place again. The man says that the trip will take place next year, although he had already recently participated in this war. Unfortunately, this was an imperial order, and the count had no influence on his decision. Due to crop failure, the Felix family is in dire straits, and on top of that, military expenses have appeared. The count is unhappy with the current state of affairs and is terribly angry about it. After this, he takes out a letter that concerns his daughter Juliet. In it, the girl was proposed to, and this news discourages her. Last year, a baron lost his wife and is now looking for a new one. The count is about to accept this proposal, and Juliet snatches the letter from her father's hands. The girl decides to familiarize herself with the contents of the document. But when she finds out the age of the baron who proposed to her, she is almost speechless. She hopes that this is just a joke, and that her father will not marry her off to a 60-year-old man. Juliet says that she does not want to agree to this marriage and does not understand why her father decided everything for her. Rosa hugs her daughter and explains that this man is from a wealthy family and owns several mines. But Juliet flatly refuses to marry the old man, despite the promised luxurious life. She offers to give him Celia as a wife. However, her sister wields fire thunder, and she cannot marry. Moreover, this baron is ready to give a huge dowry for Juliet. For the Felix family, this is a very profitable deal, and the mother asks her daughter to fulfill her duty as a noble lady. The girl holds this letter with trembling hands and feels her hopelessness in this situation. She is fully aware of her full responsibility, but does not want to agree to this adventure. The whole point is that the girl's heart is already occupied by love for Monsieur Claude. After this, Julie decides to ask if she can marry another influential man. If her father agrees, she would like to marry the second prince. But the girl's father is extremely furious about this decision, since Claude is not even the crown prince. He will not be able to ascend the throne and has no financial support. Even the fact that Claude is a prince doesn't change anything for Juliet. A man with high status but no money is worth nothing in this world. And today, Juliet is forced to watch the fun of her stepsister, who ruined her plans. At that moment, she notices several women heading towards her. One of them is Count Gin's wife, whose opinion carries great weight in high society. The woman's name is Amelia, and Julie is very surprised that she decided to talk to her. The girl greets her mistress with a bow and hears her inquire about her sister. Juliet decides this is her chance, as Amelia loves rumors more than anyone else. Now, the reputation of the dirty sister depends only on Juliet herself. The girl pretends to look sad and says that Celia has a different mother. After this, Mrs. Amelia turns her gaze to our heroine. She notices that Celia has an overly satisfied expression on her face. Apparently, this girl considers herself the star of today's celebration. Juliet apologizes for her sister, who made many people feel uncomfortable with her behavior. Amelia remarks that today was supposed to be Juliet's debut, and she is sorry that her day was ruined. It was very cruel of her stepsister to behave so freely, but Juliet again pretends to be a noble lady and asks not to blame Celia. After all, it is only the girl herself who is to blame for not being able to win in a fair fight. Amelia is filled with compassion for her and promises to protect poor Juliet. Then the girl adds that it is not her sister's fault, that she does not like generally accepted boundaries and prefers freedom. After this, the Countess concludes that Celia's values are very different from those of a noble lady. Now she understands why the girl became Count Cole's companion. After all, the Count had never been seen in the company of a girl before. At this moment, Juliet and Amelia decide to share something more intimate. The girl reports that Celia ignored her father's objections and forced herself on the Count. This news completely discourages Amelia and brings our heroine down to rock bottom in her eyes. Now it's clear why such a closed guy suddenly had a date at the banquet. It's obvious that this girl is simply manipulating him and doesn't give the man a break. Meanwhile, Celia doesn't even suspect that evil tongues are talking about her. Amelia feels compassion for Juliet and understands that her family has had a hard time. At this moment, the girl covers her sly smile with a fan, as she cannot contain her victorious emotions. After this, Juliet asks the Countess to keep all this a secret. But for socialite ladies, such a request sounds like a direct call to action. Amelia says goodbye to the girl and asks her to contact her if anything worries her. After this, the Countess begins to talk to other girls and spreads dirty gossip about Celia. It is impossible to convey the emotions that the aristocrats experience from such news. At this time, Juliet stands aside and rejoices in her victory. Suddenly, she looks up and finds her idol there. The girl's eyes begin to glow, as just the sight of her beloved makes her feel joy. At this point, Kai thanks his companion for the dance, which has now ended. All this time, the ladies continue to discuss Celia and believe that she blackmailed Cole for a dance. It is a great tragedy for the Tola's family to have such an unprincipled, illegitimate daughter. Moreover, some time ago, the ladies saw Celia communicating with Prince Claude. With such behavior, the girl looks very pathetic, trying to pounce on every man in a row. For Celia, such rumors do not go unnoticed, and she again experiences a feeling of disappointment. Kai notices the girl's sadness and decides to somehow cheer up his charge. The man asks Celia not to worry, as these are just dirty rumors. At this moment, all the guests' attention switches to another person. Celia looks up and focuses all her attention on what she sees. She finds the royal family lined up on the balcony of the hall. The crown prince appears in front of everyone and greets the assembled people. After this, the man turns to his brother, and Claude salutes him. However, there is no familial love in his eyes at all. It is obvious that there has been a long-standing animosity between the brothers. The crown prince feels in control of the situation and reports that he and Claude have not seen each other for a long time.